training from Brigham and Women's Hospital, Harvard University. She is a lecturer and consultant neurologist in Aga Khan University Hospital and the president of Epilepsy Foundation, Pakistan. She has received several awards for her advocacy in epilepsy and recent recipient of Gold Medal for Excellence in Service. It is my understanding that Dr. Fawzia, unfortunately, has not been allowed to enter the United States to visit her sister in prison or speak here, despite her living and receiving professional training in America. Next, I'm very pleased to introduce our special guest moderator who will lead the discussion, our dear brother and coalition partner, Al-Haj Mori Salah Khan. He is a lifelong and outspoken human rights advocate based in Washington, D.C., an author, poet, and the director of the Afia Foundation. He has spent his life at the forefront of these struggles, has attended the full sham trial against Dr. Afia, and led the campaign for her freedom in the United States, writing extensively about the case and traveling across the country and speaking at various mosques and community centers to advocate for her. You can watch his weekly talk show, A Conversation with Mori Salah Khan, Sundays at 3 p.m. on Salam Media. He has authored many books and articles, but his most recent book, which you can purchase from Amazon, is entitled The Imprisonment of Imam Jamil Abdullah Al-Amin, aka H. Rap Brown. Is it a government conspiracy? It includes essays by other notable contributors, including Professor Cornel West. And inshallah, we'd love to have Brother Mori return to discuss this case in a future webinar, inshallah. Finally, I'm pleased to introduce my father, who is joining us from Istanbul, Dr. Sami Al-Aryan, a former political prisoner in the US who has experienced torturous conditions of confinement firsthand in the inhumanity and physical and mental anguish of the prison system. He is currently the director of the Center for Islam and Global Affairs, SIGA, and public affairs professor at Istanbul Zaim University. He received his PhD in computer engineering in 1986 and was a tenured academic in the US for 2 decades, receiving Best Teaching Awards at the University of South Florida. During his 4 decades in the US, before his ultimate deportation, my father founded numerous institutions and publications in the fields of education, research, religion, and interfaith, as well as civil and human rights. He was a prolific speaker across many US campuses, especially on Palestine, Islam, and the West. He's authored many papers, written several studies, and numerous articles, excuse me, focusing on foreign policy, Palestine, and the Arab Spring phenomena. Thank you very much to all 3 of you for joining the Coalition's webinar today. There is a tremendous amount of interest in this case, and I hope our audience today can learn more about the case of Dr. Afia Siddiqui, a victim of our government's conspiracy and cover-up. I invite our viewers today to join the movement calling for Sister Afia's freedom. Finally, if you support our advocacy efforts, please donate to both the Coalition for Civil Freedoms and the Afia Foundation to help sustain our work. Without further ado, I'm happy to turn it over to Brother Mori Salah Khan. Jazakallah khair for joining us and leading this discussion. And inshallah, he'll be with you until we close out the event. Thank you, Brother Mori. You got to unmute yourself. I'm sorry. Yeah, thank you. Oh, you're still muted. Oh, there you are.
Am I good now?
Yes. Salam alaikum.
Okay.
Okay.
Walaikum salam wa rahmatullah. Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen. Ashhadu an la ilaha illallah wahdahu la sharika lah wa ashhadu anna Muhammadan abduhu wa rasuluh. My brothers and sisters in Islam, my friends of Facebook of all persuasions, I want to begin by thanking Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for giving us this opportunity this afternoon to address this very important issue, an issue that has been a burning ember in my heart for a number of years now. I also want to extend a special note of thanks to the Coalition for Civil Freedoms and its executive director, who has accepted the baton from her father, alhamdulillah. The Coalition for Civil Freedoms is an organization that I often reference in my work as the most important organization in my estimation, dealing with Muslim political prisoners and their families in the United States. The Afia Foundation, one of the coalition members, is a close second. But by far, the Coalition for Civil Freedoms, also known as the National Coalition to Protect Civil Freedoms, its original name, is an organization that is very, very dear to my heart, and it's one that I often reference again in my work because of the very important work that this coalition is doing throughout the country. It is my pleasure to have this opportunity to moderate the discussion that will unfold today. And let me say before I introduce the first guest, there is a large demonstration taking place right now in Washington, D.C. In fact, it's nearing its conclusion. It's been going on for the better part of the day. It started this morning, late this morning. It's the commemoration of the 57th anniversary of the 1963 March on Washington. And this historic commemoration is focused on issues of justice in the United States, especially as it pertains to the clarion call, Black Lives Matter. Last night, I was in the company of a father, of a young man who was shot in his back point blank, at point blank range, in his back 7 times. And right now, he's in a hospital. And subhanAllah, despite the fact that he has been paralyzed by this unjust, totally unnecessary police assault on his life, he was handcuffed, as Afia was handcuffed, to his bed, despite being paralyzed and despite being the target of an unjust police attempted homicide. I was with his father last night and a few other brothers. I was invited to a dinner meeting to meet him and to talk with him and to hear from him. If it weren't for this, first of all, a janazah for a good brother of ours, Atmel Muhammad, who passed away a few days ago. If it was not for his janazah today that took place at around 12:30 at ISWA, and this webinar that was scheduled for today, I would be downtown. That's where my spirit is, with those tens of thousands of people that are down there at the in front of the Jefferson Memorial. SubhanAllah, that is where I would be. But the fact that I'm here for this webinar is an indication of how important this webinar is for me. And it's, in spirit, it is connected to what is going on downtown in Washington, D.C. With that said, we want to begin this renewed discussion on our sister in Islam, Dr. Afia Siddiqui. And in order for us to do justice, I think it would be best for especially the benefit of those who either don't know the history of this case or have forgotten much of it, because, after all, it is 17 years old. And we don't hear enough of it in the United States, where our sister is being wrongfully held. I think it's important for us to delve into some history behind this case. And for that, we want to introduce our dear sister, Dr. Fawzia Siddiqui, who resides in Karachi, Pakistan, her family's home city, so that she can begin the process of walking us through what happened in March of 2003 to begin this tragic saga. Now, I'm not seeing my sister Fauzia or Dr. Samuel Arian. So if there
Assalamu alaikum,
is,
brother. Can
I
you
hear
hear me?
you. There you go. I see you
Okay,
now.
brother. Hi.
MashaAllah ta'ala.
Okay, great.
Walaikum salam, my sister. Good to see you again. I
Yes, it is.
regret that it has to be under these circumstances where we're still talking about the wrongful imprisonment of your sister and my sister, but it's good to see you, and it looks like you are well from what I can see. And please begin the process of walking us through what happened in March of 2003 and how it has affected your family.
Brother, this is a question that's not very easy to answer. It's 17 years. It's like a lifetime. A lifetime in, it's like trying to contain a river in your palm. I was in the US, and anyway, in March 2003, Afia had just finished her iddah, and my father had also just passed away. So she was with my mother during that iddah period, and so she was going for Islamabad, and she had a dream that she was about to fulfill and start working on, and that was to bring about an education system. But she always thought that all the problems of Pakistan and the Muslim world in general is the education system and the lack of their knowledge of what their true history is. And so she had this dream, and she had been working on a curriculum and on a way of education that she thought would be beneficial and would make a change and would create a Muslim youth that knew where they were coming from and that knew how to respect and what to do about other religions. And her institute was to be something like Harvard, Oxford, like Cambridge, like MIT. And so what she wanted was that, the institution would be of such a caliber and the education would be so good that within 10 years, the graduates would be proficient in both where they come from and their roots, as well as the modern needs of society and sciences and social sciences and all of that. So that was her dream, and she was leaving for Islamabad, and what she had with her was that education system and that curriculum and the whole proposal. And she had applied for a piece of land which she had received, which she had actually gotten the allotment letter for. And that was like a whole education city. It was an evolution, an educational revolution. So anyway, she was going to Islamabad, and that was the last that anyone saw of her. She went with her 3 children, and our uncle lives in Islamabad, so she was obviously going to stay with her, but she never made it over there. And my mother was here alone, and so she got a threat that if she's going to, file reports and make a fuss, then she's going to get 4 dead bodies. And 4 dead bodies will be left outside your gate. And so, she was in a frenzy, didn't know what to do. And with all the neighbors, you've been to Pakistan and you've seen that how much free advice we all have and how neighbors and all come together. And they were all like, some were saying, if you say something, then she'll be dead. So don't say anything, keep quiet, it'll be a ransom, it'll be this. So, but still my mom made phone calls. She knew people. She knew the chief of police. So she called him. And anyway, to cut the long story short, no ransom call came, and then they said that this is someone who knows them, and if that's the case, then she's not going to be released ever. And so while all this is going on in the US, I'm doing my rounds, and what I hear is Tom Brokaws on NSNBC, Tom Brokaws show. And on that, I see my sister's, while rounding on the thing, I see my sister's picture. And he's saying that they've arrested her. So, and she's practically with the FBI. So that's what happened. And after that, it's like hush, hush, as if, she's just fallen off the surface of the earth or something after, and her 3 children have disappeared. And no one knows where they are. We did everything we could in that situation where Pakistan was under the influence of an army dictator and a person who himself writes in his own book that he was selling his own people. So, so under that dictatorship, there were a lot of censors and everything. All I could do was send emails, and 5 years went by. 2003, 2008. We knew nothing about Afia until we heard, actually before that, say a year before, I think 2007, I came across Muazzam Beg, who was an ex-detainee of Bagram and Gitmo, and he had written a book by the name of Enemy Combatants. I came across that book, and suddenly I was like, I need to reach out to this person. And, and he mentioned that there was a woman, a Pakistani woman, whom he could hear crying, he could hear screaming. And he said when he asked when he was being released, and he asked, and then they told her that it's a Pakistani woman called Afia Siddiqui. And that's when, again, we, started sending emails, trying to contact him and trying to get to the government and all. And then a British journalist, Sister Yvonne Ridley, who was captured by the Taliban and was impressed by the way that they had incarcerated her. And she became a Muslim. And then we say in Urdu, Pasma mil gaye Kaabe ko sanam khane se, which is basically that the Kaaba was saved from people who did not believe in it, but they converted, so the reverts. So she reverted to Islam, and then she went to Bagram, and then there she was told about Afia Siddiqui, and then she came to Pakistan, and then with our current Prime Minister, who at that time was struggling in politics, took up this case, and they did a press conference, and then they called me. And when I was going, we received so many threats, and my mother received phone calls and threats, and I received threats, and we actually even had a bullet sent over to us, and a dead body was placed in a bag outside our front gate. And my mom was told explicitly that you are only crying for one daughter, now you'll be crying for 2 daughters. I was told that you will be, your children will be left without a mother, or you will be crying for your children, etc., etc., etc. All kinds of threats that you can imagine. And then it was my mother's decision, basically, and she said that, I thought after 5 years, I really didn't think Afia would be alive. And when I heard about the horrifying screams of prisoner 650, the Grey Lady of Bagram, and the horrifying things, I mean, I can't imagine anyone sustaining that and still being alive. And then, it was, how did she get there? And this is not Afia. This is something else. This is some conspiracy theory. This is some, it was very difficult to absorb and comprehend. And actually, our Afia, how could she get there? I mean, what happened? all she wanted to do was to bring a change. All she wanted to do was to bring back the Muslim empire. She used to say that in 30 years, we were the leaders of 3 continents because we had mothers like Khadija and Fatima radiallahu anhu, may Allah be pleased with them, and Hakim and Salma. So that was her dream. I mean, and then, they started relating all kinds of terrorism charges and things like that. Where are they coming from? I mean, this is not the Afia. Who are you painting? Where is Afia? And so she's been painted and tainted in so many ways that the real Afia seemed to have disappeared. And it just didn't make sense. And honestly, I kind of was like, I think she's dead and this is all just a nightmare. And but anyway, my mother said that, if your going can help, if this woman exists and your going there can make a difference in her life and death is with Allah. And as long as you're not destined to die, your death is going to protect you. So you go. And so I went. And that's the beginning of this campaign where I was alone. And now we are sitting here and I am talking to people across 3 continents. And subhanallah, campaign started, and then after that, everyone knows.
Well, Sister Fawzia, I often think back to the observation that the former U.S. Attorney General Ramsey Clark made in Texas when he traveled to Texas at our invitation with the intent to visit Afia and to visit another political prisoner who was held at the time, a lawyer, Lynn Stewart, who had been involved in the Sheikh Omar Abdulrahman case and ended up being punished in a very unprecedented fashion for something that she did that violated the SAMS agreement. She was prosecuted. He was able to visit Lynn Stewart, but he wasn't able to visit Afia, and they lied to him and told him that Afia didn't want him to visit. Later that same evening, when he attempted to visit Afia and he participated in a rally with us in downtown Fort Worth, he said at a masjid, one of the largest centers in that part of the country, in his speech, he said the case of Dr. Afia Siddiqui is the worst case. He said it is the worst case of individual injustice I have ever witnessed. And when he said that, it resonated very deeply with me because I had been feeling that way all along. Of all the cases I had been involved in before Afia's and since Afia's, hers is the worst case of individual injustice. Part of the reason, from my humble perspective, of why he, the case resonates with him in that way and with me in that way is because, it wasn't just Afia. It was also her children. Her children were taken as well. Please share some information about that for those who need to know how large a monstrosity this case is in the area of injustice.
When Afia left, just look at, how can even people believe something like this? She was going to her uncle's house. She had a 6-month-old baby whom she was breastfeeding, okay, in her lap. She had a 3-year-old baby girl, Mariam, and a 5-year-old son with her. Does someone go to fight a war or to commit a crime with their little babies? Babies that meant the world to her. When she was little, she was into dolls a lot. And she loved her dolls like anything. Even if my brother would tease her and turn the doll upside down, and she would be crying and that, my doll, something's happened. She'd take it to my dad and say, please check it out because something's happened to her brain or something because he turned her upside down. And so, I mean, she loved children and her own, they were her life. I mean, and then she's going there. She's going there with these big plans, with this big dream, and with this excitement. And then she's made to disappear with those little children. And if you go through the investigative report that the International Justice Network has produced, based on an audio recording of one of the intelligence officers of Pakistan, he has very clearly said in that we took the children with us because they're the best form of coercion. I mean, what's the best way of getting a mother to admit to doing anything? Is to put their children. I mean, if my kid was put in front of me and they'd say, we're going to hurt him, just hurt him, let alone, kill or anything, or we'll break a finger or something, I would even admit to anything, even to the great tsunami. I did it, okay. I'd admit to anything they want me to admit. I would do anything they say. Leave my children alone. Any mother would do that. Any parent would do that. I mean, we would feel hurt even if we saw another human being being tortured because of us. We'd say, stop that. So, and, when I read in that, and when I read about the baby being made to disappear, and when I heard news of how they strangled him because at the border, they didn't want to take responsibility. And, the things that I've heard, and when the person that told me so calmly that this is what happened, I couldn't move. I could not even talk to anyone. I was muted for about 3 days until I managed to regain myself. And how can anyone even so calmly mention how they just strangled him and left him to die? A little 6-month-old baby? So I don't know what is true or not. I don't have a dead body, but the gravity of this whole thing, when we talk of cover-ups and that, where is the baby? Why was Afia shot? She's the one who shot, and then she's the one who's having to spend 86 years. How 86 years? How could she even be convicted? I thought this was a scientific world. Where there's DNA evidence, where there's forensic evidence that's totally in your favor, how can you convict someone without forensic evidence? Just on the basis of testimony and perjuries? That's a travesty of justice. And I think everyone that knows anything about the law, even though her court papers and all that I tried to get from there, they're so severely redacted that you can't make anything out of it. But even that is enough to show the injustice.
Absolutely.
Because the forensic.
Absolutely. Yeah. And, I think it's also important to note here that you said Miriam was 3 years old and Ahmed was 5 years old. And subhanAllah, they were not returned to their family home until 5, in the case of Ahmed, 5 years later, in the case of Miriam, 6.5 years later. And now how old are they now? These are young adults now.
Yes,
and they've grown up without their mother.
Yes, they have.
You have been their mother their surrogate mother, and in addition to being their auntie, you are their surrogate mother. But they are very much aware of the fact that the woman that gave them birth, you know, is still being held captive unjustly in another part of the world. I mean, how have they been able to navigate that emotional journey that they've been on?
Brother, let me just quote Ahmed on this. When he was little and when he was returned to me, that was also after a lot of struggle. But anyway, you know, I asked him about how badly he was treated, and I could see the scars and everything, and you know, his legs were all the things. But you know what he said? He said, "You know what, Auntie? They could have cut me into little pieces, but if only they had left me with my mom and not separated.
Mm.
Even if they beat me every day, but at least they should have left me with my mom." So the worst form of human torture was separating little babies from their mother.
Yeah. Okay, my sister, I want to bring our brother, Dr. Sami Al-Arian, into this conversation.
Yes.
Dr. Sami Al-Arian, he has the unfortunate experience of having been a political prisoner himself. You know, I'd like for our brother Sami to begin his involvement in this conversation by, you know, sharing with the viewing and listening audience what being a political prisoner is like. What is that experience like?
Thank you.
If you are you with us now, brother?
Yes, I am.
Okay, I don't see you up on the video, but I can hear your voice.
Very well. Thank you very much for inviting me. Thank you for moderating this, and thanks for the Coalition for Civil Freedoms to bring this case to the fore. This is for me, one of the most
Yes.
incredible, cruel, egregious, and outrageous cases I've ever come across. You know, not just Ramsey Clark, the Honorable Ramsey Clark, but I think any decent human being, if they hear about the specifics of this case, they will be outraged. Let's review some of the facts on this case. Dr. Afia was abducted from the streets of Karachi in 2003 at the behest of the FBI. This is uncontested. So this is in the so-called, this is in the context of the so-called war on terror, where there are no rules, no protections, no civil rights, no constitutional rights, no one respecting anything. Anybody who is suspected by the American government of any kind of even lame suspicion, just your name came across an investigation, they were targeted. We all know about the black sites, where people were taken to different parts of the world being tortured in order to bring some kind of information that they had no idea what kind of information they're trying to get. Nevertheless, they were sending people to Morocco, to Egypt, to Afghanistan and Bagram, you know, in Thailand and in other places. All these so-called black sites were basically torture chambers. And that's what happened. Somebody mentioned her name, and she was abducted by Pakistani agents. She was given to the FBI or the CIA, and she was kept somewhere in a black site for 5 years. That much we know. Now, why did that happen? Why did the Pakistani agents got involved? Because you had a dictator, as Dr. Fawzia was saying, in the name of Musharraf. 3 years prior to 9/11, the total accumulative aid to Pakistan was $9.1 million. 3 years after 9/11, the cumulative aid given to the Pakistani government was $4.7 billion. They were basically collecting people in order to get money. And he mentioned that in his book, in his memoir, that he handed over hundreds of people to the American government at their behest. They will give them a name, they will send agents, they will abduct them from the street or somewhere. They will be handed over to the Americans, and they were never to be seen again. part of the problem that we have today is where it originated from. The Pakistani government does not want to acknowledge its part in this tragedy. Now, after she was abducted in Karachi, in Pakistan, she was next seen in Afghanistan. What does that tell you? Who took her from Pakistan to Afghanistan? And now, 5 years later, she has lost physically, mentally. She is a different woman. She's no longer the Afia that people know. She's no longer the scientist, the optimistic, the person who wants to further education, work with children. She's no longer that person. So she's left, now you're left with a human being that is half destroyed. Then she is seen by local people who suspect her because she does not speak the language, the same language as Pakistan. These people are in Afghanistan. So they handed her over to the police in Afghanistan. She's kept. And then they call the Americans and tell them that they found this woman. Then several Americans come, soldiers, and they thought she was handcuffed or under detention. She was behind the curtain. So when she opens the curtain, she sees them because now she hears English, and she startled because what does that tell you? It tells you where she had been for 5 years prior and what was done to her. Then they thought that she was going to attack them, so they shoot her. Now they shoot her, she's almost dead, so they concoct a story. They make up a story. That story is basically that she was trying to grab a gun, this frail woman, and shoot them. And she was tried based on that, on this concocted story that doesn't make any sense, because when her legal team went back and checked all the forensic evidence, there is not a scintilla of evidence that she was that she had a gun or fired a gun or at any, in any context that she had at any moment a gun. And the fact of the matter is that she was the one who's being shot, and all the bullets in the walls were coming from that direction, that is her direction. But they were going to lose their jobs if they were indicted, or if they were charged with the crime of shooting an unarmed person. And then she goes through a fast trial, and unfortunately she gets convicted and sentenced to 86 years. So this is a textbook political case, how it started and how it ended. And it is shameful that we have to talk about this 17 years later, that in Pakistan, where they had handled her tragedy, the political leadership have been absent or have been trying to hide behind lies and fabrications, and they don't want to step up to the plate and try to get her released. And I have on good authority also that the Americans, after a while, they lost interest because they got what they wanted. These soldiers will never be charged with anything. They found the scapegoat. They could have handed her over. When a CIA contractor killed 2 Pakistanis a few years ago, the US government was willing to trade her for him. It was the Pakistani government that did not want to ask for her. And that's what, at the time, Secretary Kerry, the Secretary of State at the time, he said they never asked for her. We probably would have given her, given her to them, if that was what they asking. They were asking for something different. So my point is about political prisoners. You are targeted because of your faith, your beliefs, your associations, your work, your activism, what you stand for, your principles, or there are certain powerful groups after you. They're trying to get you in trouble. This is the case, what happened to me. We had very powerful group who were trying to get me for a long time. But in her case, certainly, she was targeted because somebody mentioned her. Now imagine if she was a US citizen or she had some kind of constitutional protections, none of that would have happened. But because of who she is, her faith, her skin color, where she's coming from, the place she was in, she lost all that because the so-called war on terror has no rules. Everything is basically permissible. They can do whatever they want in the name of the American people. I believe that if the American people know what's being done in their name, they would never stand up to that. We saw what happened in Abu Ghraib. When the truth came out, people were outraged of what happened. This is not us. This is, torture is not what it's supposed to be on, but this is what their government is doing in their name. And that's what happened to Afia Siddiqui. She was abducted, she was tortured, she was detained, and then she was wrongly prosecuted. All that happened to this single woman. And what is shameful also is how the Muslim community, the American Muslim community, has dealt with this case. It's like it didn't exist. They put in their heads in the sand and act like nothing happened, like she doesn't matter, that she's nobody. That is outrageous. Instead of standing up, just imagine if this person was a Jewish person, how the Jewish community, and I applaud them for that, in the United States would have risen as one community trying to get that person who's being dealt with unjustly free, and they will speak on their behalf. I challenge any mosque in the United States today to talk about the case of Sister Afia Siddiqui, to even mention her name in a khutbah, in a speech, in any way. What are they afraid of? She is innocent. Everybody knows that. Even the American government knows that. Everybody knows that she was abducted. Everybody knows that she was taken and snatched from her children. Everybody knows that she was tortured. Everybody knows that she is no longer mentally able even to express herself. Yet, we look at her like she's nobody, that she doesn't count. And that's what is so shameful. And I think we need to change that culture. We need people to speak up and to stand up to power. She does not have to be in a prison where COVID-19, the coronavirus, is spreading like crazy. 5 women already died in that prison. She could at least be taken to a house confinement. Her brother is close by in Texas. She can go and sit with her. Why is that too difficult to ascertain? Why can't the Muslim community talk about this? Why can't they rise up? Not just the Muslim community, anybody, any decent person can ask that. She does not belong to prison. She never belonged to prison. She has been tortured enough. She has been punished with no crime. That's what's happening, and these are the facts.
And tell me, Dr. Sami, what is imprisonment like? When, Afia is in a very special, she's under a very special, and I say use the term special in a very dark and oppressive definition in terms. She's like under special administrative measures unofficially that keep her completely cut off from the outside world. It has been a long time since Afia has been able to have telephone conversation, telephone contact with any members of her family, with her brother right there in Texas, with her family in Pakistan. She is completely cut off. And the officials responsible for her at the Pakistani consulate in Houston, who have oversight responsibility for her to ensure that her human rights are being protected because she is a citizen. I mean, they don't do the kind of visitation and checkup on this Muslim woman and Pakistani citizen that they should. You again were a prisoner. You were under a special confinement conditions as a political prisoner. What was it like for you, and what do you imagine it's like for Afia Siddiqui, who is under an even more oppressive layer of cutoff from the outside world?
Yeah, well, everybody knows that in the U.S. you have 2 systems of justice, and this is not a secret. Even public officials, congressmen and senators know about this, that we have one system for the rich and one system and white privileged persons, and one system for the others, especially for colored. I was in prison. I've seen in prisons where over half the population are African Americans and Latinos, and I've seen how they've been treated. But also within the system, we also have 2 systems. One for everybody and one for Muslims. That's what many people do not know. There are certain rules that they have been applied in the prison system only for Muslim prisoners. 99% of them are Muslim prisoners. They may throw 1 or 2 just to say that this is not about your faith. They have a system called, for instance, CMUs for a long time, where they bring Muslims under certain measures and certain rules. They will be applied to them, and they will be denied certain privileges and rights that all prisoners enjoy. In my case, for instance, I didn't have phone calls, for months. I was denied many things, such as even canteen items, visitations. You don't have contact visits. You never get a contact visit, especially when you are being targeted politically, like in my case and Dr. Afia Siddique's case. You don't get during your trial, you don't even get the time needed to sit with your lawyers so that you can prepare for your case properly. And in my case, I suffered from that a lot. The legal items. Actually, I was confined in a federal prison where they do not allow for any kind of legal preparation, because that's not what it's set up for. Before trial, you're basically in a prison next to the courthouse where you have all kinds of accessibility to your evidence or the evidence against you, and so on and so forth. But more egregiously in these cases is the use of secret evidence. Secret evidence has been used. We were fighting, you were with us in that fight in 97 and 2002 or 2001, when we were fighting this secret evidence. It was used against immigrants, mostly Muslims. But after that, secret evidence has become part and parcel of the judicial system. They call it classified evidence, where the accused doesn't know anything about it. At best, your lawyer may get some kind of a summary. They can never talk to you about it, but they may not even know the full facts, because you don't know how to defend yourself without knowing what the evidence is against you. And then talk about the harsh treatment from the guards and the prison management. I had been to 14 different prisons across the United States. They would just ship me from one to the next. And every time I would be dealt with harshly. And when I try in one prison, that wasn't one exception, the warden, who was really his own man, and would bring me once a month to chat with me because he liked intellectual discussions. And he confessed to me that he had been told that I should be treated in a certain way. And he refused to do that. It is the same instruction that came from the government in all other prisons, where I had been there, and they would tell them, he has to be treated there. How would I know this? Because the first couple of days I am like normal prisoner, but after that, everything is turned upside down, and the harsh treatment starts with the isolation, with the solitary, and all what comes with it, the lack of access to telephone, the lack of access to your family, the lack of access to canteen items, and so on and so forth. All these things come because you have been targeted, you have been marked as a political prisoner. And I think the Sister Afia is no different. She had been identified by the media, the sleaze media, as being associated with certain groups that are looked at as being the sworn enemy of the United States, without any proof. She's just been linked to them, and they just call it lady this and lady that in order to just have maybe more circulation. And that's the image that the prison systems, the prison guards, and the whole government has around her. Let's keep in mind that Afia Siddique was never charged with a terrorist act. She was arrested, tortured, penalized, mentally tortured, and then she was charged with attack on American soldiers, even though she was the one who was shot. That's how absurd this case is. But she's never been associated in the court system with terrorism.
The wise man once said, "Those who can make us believe absurdities can also cause us to commit atrocities." And this is an atrocity of a major magnitude. Getting back to the question of, what can we do? Where should most of the pressure be applied to try to bring about some modicum of justice in the case of Afia? I think one of the things that needs to be identified is, the hands of those responsible, first for kidnapping her, which we've already identified. There were agents within the US government. There were collaborative agents within the Pakistani government, be it the executive branch of the government under the former Parvez Musharraf, coupled with perhaps the ISI and military intelligence. You have this, and on this note, we should also note that there was a former high-ranking official of the Parvez government, of the Musharraf government. I think he was a foreign minister, if I'm not mistaken. I'm sure that my sister, Dr. Fauzia, can clarify this, who basically admitted and expressed regret for having been a part of that nefarious campaign to take Afia and to hand her over to the Americans. He expressed regret for that.
Yes,
but
it was Khurshid Kusuri. Khurshid
Kusuri, yes.
Kusuri.
Was he the former foreign minister?
He was a foreign minister at that time, and he holds a very important position in the PTI government, in the current government.
Isn't that something?
Yes.
So pressure definitely needs to be applied on both the Pakistani government and on the American government, but we also need to factor into the equation those special interest groups that I am very familiar with through my work on Afia's case, as well as a number of others. But Afia's case is the one that really brought them out of the woodwork. And that is the Zionist element, the Zionists. They have been, Dr. Samuel Arian, they have been very determined in their in their manipulation of information around Afia, in using their enormous influence to make things difficult for folks who want to give support to her, and to intimidating others. And I have felt this for a long time. For a long time, I had felt this, this Zionist element in Afia Siddiqui's case, but it really became crystal clear to me when, just a couple of years ago, a friend of mine out of Boston. Now, Afia spent most of her years in the United States in Boston. She was very well known and respected in the Muslim community and outside of the Muslim community, both because of her academic achievement and also because of the extracurricular social justice oriented or humanitarian involvement that she had. I mean, in trying to give dawah to prisoners, to being the voice that helped to organize much of the Boston metropolitan community during the Bosnian crisis. I remember, I'll never forget, Imam Abdullah Farouk, one of the most senior imams in the city of Boston, an African-American brother who, alhamdulillah, he was one of the very few who never stopped publicly advocating for Afia. He told me that when, at the height of the Bosnian crisis, he said there was one person who was most responsible for galvanizing the entire Boston community to respond to the humanitarian needs of the Bosnians as a communal force. He said that one person was Afia Siddiqui, who was just an undergraduate student at the time in Boston. This is where she spent most of her years. This is what a friend of mine, an activist out of Boston, sent to me this message a couple of years ago. She said, "Salam, I thank you for the video about Sister Afia's case. I would like to recommend that you sue media establishments that have created false news about her. This will enable you to acquire documents during discovery. Afia got the attention of very hardcore Zionist groups when she was attending Brandeis and advocating for Islamic awareness. There is no doubt in my mind that she was targeted by Zionist groups who had also targeted the Boston Roxbury Mosque. In this case, the Muslims sued the news media for slander and found out that a very specific group of Jewish lawyers, media people, and money guys met to discuss how to take specific Muslim people in leadership positions down. They created a coordinated attack by creating a legal situation and simultaneously printing news media stories about that person being a terrorist. As soon as word got out that there was proof of a conspiracy against religious rights, which is a federal crime, the Zionists dropped their case. I advise you to look into who to sue and figure out if Tamra or which Zionist groups were involved in a conspiracy to get rid of Sister Afia around the time she was quoted in the newspaper saying that if everyone knew about the beauty of Islam, they would all want to be Muslim. At that time, Jewish groups started hurling the Islamo-fascist slur at her, end quote. My response to that friend out of Boston was, this is a very insightful piece of analysis. I have no doubt, based upon what I've seen and experienced over the years, that your analysis is on point. Unfortunately, litigation of all types, but especially of this type, takes time and money, and we regrettably have neither in reserve. I'm going to bring this to the attention of others, including some larger organization folk, and see what can be done with it. Again, I have no doubt about the accuracy of your conclusion. Believe it or not, I have felt this way for years, but I had no solid evident proof to hang my suspicion on. Now, this brings me to this point that I want to make before I invite, the response from both of you on your perspective on this. I have, for a number of years now, been very disappointed with my Muslim brethren here in the United States for their lack of courage, their lack of intestinal fortitude to really, to have the courage to confront the major challenges of our time. Afia Siddiqui's case is one of those major litmus test challenges of our time. And I have come to the conclusion, especially after I got this message from out of Boston, which confirmed what I had already felt based upon experience that I've had in different parts of the country with being blocked by elements outside the Muslim community. All right, that this very powerful lobby has intimidated many of our leaders and, yes, truth be told, many of our activists into silence. Some of our, brothers and sisters who are known to be courageous when it comes to addressing certain issues, they will not touch Afia Siddiqui. Even our sister activists do not want to weigh in on Afia Siddiqui. And it's very, very sad and it's heartbreaking, really, because what we don't realize, those of us who are guilty of doing this, is that we are in fact helping to strengthen the atmosphere that already has many of us so intimidated, so afraid, so insecure. And it doesn't make us, at the end of the day, it doesn't make us safe. I'd like, beginning with you, Dr. Sami, for you to weigh in on this, because again, you have a very unique perspective to respond to this from, having, been at one time one of the most prominent political activists in the country, someone who was given credit for helping to elect a president, being a significant factor in the election of a president, only to a few years later, have all of that count for nothing when they came against you, because it was time for you to be targeted. And I remember, how despite the prominence that you had, and the access that you had to very powerful and prominent offices in the nation's capital and beyond, how few there were that stood by you when things really got rough. I'd like to for you to weigh in on this, Dr. Sami. You know, this element of intimidation coming from outside of government circles, special interests, powerful groups that have a inordinate influence on government affairs, and how they have been able to use that influence to keep Afia where she is under, under the most brutal conditions, imprisonment conditions that I have ever seen, I have ever witnessed in my life. What say you, Dr. Sami, on this?
Very well. Let me just tell our brothers and sisters in the Muslim community and people at large across the United States that when people are not moved by the innocence, justice that happened to an innocent person, and this could be either because of fear or absence of conviction, or both, for that matter. And I want to remind everybody that this case is political. And let me give you an example of political cases. Two cases very similar, yet different outcomes. And then I will answer your question, Brother Mark. A person by the name of Ahmed Abu Ali was charged and was arrested at the behest of the FBI, this is uncontested, in Saudi Arabia. Tortured because that's what they asked for. They wanted some information and they couldn't get it. He's an American citizen, first of all. This is very important to note. Was born in the US, educated in the US. He was having university education in Saudi Arabia when he was arrested in June 2003. He was arrested again at the behest of the FBI. The same thing that happened to Sister Afia. He was tortured by Saudi Arabia, the same thing that happened to Sister Afia. And when his parents, who are American citizens, start inquiring and suing the government, the Saudis obtained under torture a confession, false confession, that he was about to assassinate the President of the United States. Someone who's sitting in Saudi Arabia, 22 years of age, was accused of that. He was brought to the US because then the US justice system the judge started asking questions. Where is Ahmed? Why can't you answer simple questions? Do you have anything to do with his disappearance? Then the whole conversation changed. To make the long story short, he was tried and convicted and sentenced to 30 years. The government didn't like that punishment. He was resentenced to life in prison and he's now languishing in Supermax. Now, look at another story. This person's name is Timothy Joyner. He's 22 years of age. He's white American, a soldier who had been to Iraq. He did not like the fact that the US elected a black president. He, along with other soldiers, conspired to kill him. They did not just think it, they acted upon it. They bought $87,000 of ammunition and bomb-making material in Georgia. Before acting out on this plot, one of them got cold feet, went to the FBI, and confessed. Joyner, the master plan of this, was arrested. He pled after confronted with the evidence against him with 30 charges. Each one of them will probably be between 25 and life. He was sentenced to 5 years in prison so that he can get a second chance. That's what the judge says. Now, this is the nature of a political prisoner, and this is the nature of somebody that the judge looked at with compassion to give him another chance, even though he confessed to the crime. They seized the bomb-making material, and everything was in the open. Now, that's what's happening. So the Muslim community, the American Muslim community, and all freedom-loving people need to wake up to the political cases. We have political cases in America. To put your heads in the sand saying we don't have the system of justice has dealt with it is a complete lie. Is an absolutely complete lie. You know this is the case. You know that the US had many cases before, during the civil rights era and others. Jamil Amin is one of them, just to give you an example. Now, why do we know the name of Trayvon Martin? Why do we know the name of George Floyd? Why everybody knows the name of Jacob Blake? For a simple reason, because the community rose up because the community
Right.
objected, because the community stood up and demonstrated and said, we're not going to take this. Black lives matter. But our community doesn't say Muslim lives matter, because to them, either they are fearful or there is an absence of conviction, that they no longer stand for the principles that they say that we stand for. So what we need to do is very simple, Akhi. What we need to do is to stand up and speak truth to power, stand for our principle, to acknowledge that we have political prisoners, to acknowledge that there are people in prison who are in prison unjustly because of their faith, because of what they believe, because of who they associate with, because someone told about them, because the FBI is trying to make an example out of us, so we always feel down, that we can no longer speak our mind, that we can never feel free in the land of the free and the home of the brave. So what we need to do is start acting, is start demonstrating, is start speaking up, start taking positions, open positions. Every mosque in the US must have at least one lecture, one khutbah, one sermon, one speech, anything to talk about Afiya Siddiqa. Afiya Siddiqa needs, her case need to be heard by every single person in the US. When that happens, believe me, she will no longer be in prison. She will no longer be confined. That's when she becomes free. That's when her government that is abandoning her right now are doing nothing to get her out and putting their hands in the sand will start asking for her. That's when the US will find it, the hypocrisy that exists when they go after every government in the world talking about human rights, and they persecute somebody who has done nothing but was shot by their soldiers. So this is what we need to do. We need to start speaking up. We need to start talking. We need to start objecting, demonstrating. Every campaign stop, when you have a congressman, a senator, somebody, they need to raise up these issues. Afia and Jamil Amin and Ahmed Abu Ali, and we've had victories in the past few years. To our surprise, we had Ali Tamimi. No one spoke his name, and if they did, they would be whispering. Today, he's about to be freed. Why? Because there are some diligent people who are waiting for his release. We need the same spirit and the same people asking for Afia's release as well. And secondly, I want to talk to the Pakistani government in particular, especially the Prime Minister. The Prime Minister, during his campaign, has pledged that he would be talking to the Americans about the case of Afiya Siddiqa. He needs to fulfill that pledge. He needs to start acting and not bowing to some interest, whether army or intelligence or others, who are trying to hide what they did to her. It's over. She's no longer the same person. She deserves another chance. She deserves to be with her children. She deserves to be with her mom. She deserves to be with her family. That's the humane thing to do. I mean, isn't 17 years enough punishment for an innocent person? I mean, it just goes without saying. And if we do not have that compassion in our heart, if we do not have that love of justice in our heart, what good are we? What good are we? We're just looking for positions and power and authority and wealth, and life has no meaning whatsoever. I mean, you can go to the tradition, you can go to the Quran, you can go to the Bible, you can go to the Hadith, you can go to all these things, and they talk about, the essence of being a decent human being is to stand up for justice. Justice is the highest principle and value people should be advocating. Nothing else matters. Enough of just talking about the hijab and enough talking about these sayings here and there and Islamophobia. Stand up for big issues. And this is one of the biggest. Peoples are being denied their freedom, their life, and we're saying nothing about it. I was gratified when I saw American people. And by the way, that message with the brother, we have no problem with Jewish people. We have problem with Zionists. A lot of our friends are of Jewish faith. And I applaud them. A lot of my friends are like that. They stood up with me when the Muslim community abandoned us because they were fearful, not because they didn't believe in us, not because they didn't love us. They were just fearful because they were intimidated. It was our friends, Jews and Christians and people with no faith, who stood in front of the courthouse demonstrating every single day, which made a huge impression and difference in front of the jury. And some of them told him, I mean, if this is not his community who was speaking up on their behalf, these are others. Right. And that made me think. And I think that's very important, how we should reach out. This is not about being Jewish or Christian or any of that. Yes, having a political ideology like Zionism or those evangelical Christians, Islamophobic and others, not just any Christian, but Islamophobes. Okay, we have problem with this because that's how they look at Muslims as being problems that they have to be dealt with. And that's our objection. But it has to start with us. We need to start changing our attitude towards our rights and the vulnerable amongst us. Afia is a vulnerable person. Afia now has suffered enough. She needs the help and the support. And she's in the US. That puts a burden on American Muslims. They can't look the other way. They cannot hide from this fact. They need to start talking about her case. When that happens in large numbers, brother, then the Pakistani government, the American government, they don't want the headache. They have to respond. Right. She will be free, inshallah.
As we close down, I want to give the final word to our sister, Dr. Fawzia Siddiqui. I would like for her to share with us what's happening on the home front, what's happening in Pakistan. Has there been any movement of late with the Pakistani government toward doing something substantive for Afia Siddiqui? Is she still viewed nationwide as the daughter of the nation that the nation once returned? And what can we do from, Fawzia's perspective? What can we do here in the US to assist your efforts there in Pakistan? So, it's a number of questions, tied up in there. The most important being what is happening on the home front with the government with respect to Afia. Is there any movement taking place whatsoever? And the second most important question, what can we do on this side to assist you in the effort to exert pressure where pressure needs to be brought on elements of that governing apparatus within Pakistan? Sister Fawzia. Wa alaikum salam.
Brother Murray, can you hear me?
I can hear you, yes, and see you.
Oh, okay. So what's happening in Pakistan? This new government, we had a lot of hopes with this government. And unfortunately, it let us down. There were many chances that had come up. There were many chances where this government and Imran Khan himself could have asked for Afia and could have gotten Afia. And today he would be, a great leader. He would be standing in the ranks of Muhammad bin Qasim Mu'tasim Billah, and he would be like a much needed leader of the Muslim world. But unfortunately, he did not have the courage. He did not have the will. I don't even think it's about courage or anything. I think it's just about the will. This government doesn't care. It seems that the only thing they care about is where can they get 2 + 2, how many dollars can we get from what? And unfortunately, selling your own people, letting your own people to suffer, a nation's value is in its citizens. And if our leaders don't talk for us, there are elected leaders. If they do not stand for their own citizens wherever they may be, they will always be regarded in the world as beggars and nothing else.
Right.
Because their power, and my thing is that, Afia, it's been 17 years. It's a whole lifetime. Where is the justice in that? I don't see any justice being done. How can justice be done? Justice would only be done to our family if these 17 years were reversed, and that's not possible. Can Afia's children get back their childhood with their mother? Can those lost 17 years be brought back? Can Afia's prime age be brought back? The reason I struggle for Afia, the reason I keep waking everyone up, and the reason I keep sending a message every day that another day has passed by, so that on the day of judgment, all these leaders and everybody who could do something has no excuse. That's all I can do. I can only tell my brothers, I can only tell these leaders that, look, this is something that's not a small thing, as Brother Sami has already said and mentioned. This is about your dignity. I mean, daughters, women are the soul of a nation. And unfortunately, Imran Khan stood with me in rallies, in programs, and he said these very things. He cried. And he said, if only I were prime minister, see, the first thing I would do would be this. So I had hopes with him. I thought he was sincere. But it seems that he seems to be worse than the prior ones. At least during the prior times, I could at least talk to my sister. Now I'm even denied that. What can we do? I think a combined effort, as Brother Sami said, that if we all, it's all a world of democracy, and if the people lead, the leaders follow. But we have to have a unified voice. And then there's another thing. Maybe there is another way that is minus our leaders, because they don't have the courage. They've asked for so much money and they've taken so much money that they don't have the courage to ask for a human being. I mean, I'm open to suggestions. There was a question or a request in the chats, I think, by Nudrat Siddiqui, who was asking for, I think, the Council General report. So they can just, email me or contact any of you, and I will send them the latest Council General report that I have. And the other thing that I would request is that if everybody who is listening would unite and would at least, one platform, one request. And if we do that together, I think together we can bring Afia home, inshallah. Because an injustice of this magnitude and 17 years and so much torture and the horrifying stories that we hear, and she's still alive. There is a purpose to this. And I just fear that, maybe it's not Afia's test. It's our test as a nation. It's our test as an ummah.
Yes.
And maybe it's either a wake-up call, or we succeed and we wake up, or we go down the drains. And as I said, Pasma mil gaye Kaabe ko sanam khane se. Allah does not leave his innocent people just like that. So maybe Afia will get someone, but what will become of us? And that is what the purpose of my campaign is. I hope that clarifies some things.
Alhamdulillah. Before I make my final remarks to end this this discussion, we want to hear from Brother Junaid Ahmed. So if he is if he's ready to share his thoughts, we're ready to hear from him, inshallah. I received a message that Junaid Ahmed had something that he wanted to share.
He needs to unmute.
Junaid Ahmed, are you?
Yes.
Make sure you're not muted.
Jazakallah. Assalamu alaikum. Can you hear me?
Walaikum salam rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Let me just put my headphones on.
Okay.
Okay. Assalamu alaikum to everyone, to Sister
Walaikum
Fawzia,
salam wa
to
rahmatullahi
Dr.
wa barakatuh.
Sami, and to yourself, brother. And I know that within the Q&A, I pretty much posted quite a lot, and I think I may have said most of my thoughts on this issue in the Q&A. But I think that I'll be very brief and just say that this is an issue we cannot afford to lose hope on. And I know Sister Fawzia is a very dear sister of mine, frustrations with this government. I have frustrations with this government. I am just like her. I'm very close to Imran. I've written articles against, but I know the constraints that the Prime Minister is under. I know the constraints that the government has been under, and I know also that it's not as simple as what many people may have believed it to be to get Afia back. Like I had said in some of my comments, and not to make this too political, but Sister Afia's case has been utilized by the U.S. national security state as a wicked form of vengeance, basically, as a wicked form of vengeance. Once they got her under the, as both Sister Fawzia and Dr. Sami said, once they got her with the connivance of the criminal Musharraf military dictator regime and the orders that he gave to his intelligence forces. Once that happened, and once they got her, from that time on, it was very, very clear and became increasingly clear that this was basically an asset for the CIA and the Pentagon to say that, look, we are keeping her, but Pakistan, you're going to cooperate with us, you're going to do this, you're going to do that, or else you're never going to see her again. And so my point at this stage, and please, I encourage people to read the comments that I did leave in Q&A. Maybe they could get something out of that that I put in there. But I want to just get straight to the point of kind of what do we do now? That's the most important thing to help Sister Afia. And I think that the same thing what we see right now, and Sister Fawzia will know about this, Dr. Sami will know about this, what our Prime Minister is trying to do on the case of Kashmir. Now, he's been incredibly vocal, but where have we gotten on that question? You need to kind of get support. You need to internationalize it. You need, as Dr. Sami was saying, you need Muslim leaders, khutbahs, you need beyond that, social movements throughout the world and other sympathetic leaders and governments to raise the issue. So yes, this isn't 8 million Kashmiris, but this is an issue that clearly, and as I mentioned in my comment, if you go through the streets of Islamabad right now, and this was not there, but I can tell you, I've been here now in Pakistan for close to 2 decades. You did under Nawaz Sharif or under Zardari, there were no pictures of Afia Siddiqa. Obviously, now you see them all over the place in Islamabad. You can go to my village and explaining in Urdu, writing what her condition, what has happened, etc. So I don't think we can make the claim that this government does not care about Afia Siddiqa. It's a question of how it can go about to negotiate with this reckless American national security state that continues to think.
I'm sorry,
Yes,
Brother
please.
I'm very sorry, but I beg to differ here. Because people from the government have very, very, very explicitly said to me that they hope that Afia dies. And it's like, why has she not died yet? I mean, when I called them, they said, oh, isn't she dead yet? We'd gladly bring back her dead body. So please, don't say that this government is sincere in bringing Afia back. Have you heard one person from this government who has and can do anything? Have you even heard Afia's name from Imran Khan since the day he became an only once in fact Fox News
Yes.
when he was asked that question, and that was also asked by a journalist. So please don't advocate for someone who is not doing what he's supposed to be doing. I'm sorry, I beg to differ.
No, Sister Fozia,
I mean-
I agree with you on the question of, and I would like to, I will rephrase what I said. I will agree with you in terms of the rest of this government, whatever PTI is, whatever that is. In terms of Imran himself, not only on Fox News, but in other places and in those places that really matter as well. And we're talking about state to state, where, you know, I mean, I have firsthand knowledge. Okay, so what do you want to say publicly? Yeah, whatever you want to say publicly, and what you want to say first to negotiating with American officials, where then you see that they're absolutely not interested. So, anyways, I don't want to get into this, but the point that is, even if we disagree on this, okay, say we disagree on this, what is the next action? And I think that on the next action, we perhaps can agree. We have to create more awareness. We have to create global solidarity on this. And I think that, fine, if you don't think that Imran can call a global day of solidarity for Afia Siddiqui,
I think he can.
yeah. No. Or if you think he's
should.
unwilling, or
It's his duty to do that.
No. If you think he's unwilling to do it, then I will get others to do it. So that's not a problem. But I'm saying that let's talk about what we can do now, and that can then put pressure on Imran Khan or whoever else, including as you know, as on the military as well. That can put pressure on them to say that, look, this is something you have to address, and you have to address it here and now. And so, I mean, I think we can agree on that at the very least. Yes.
Oh, yes. No, I mean, I agree with a lot of things you're saying, brother. I don't mean that. But I mean, I wouldn't advocate someone who has been in government for now 3 years and, you know, has not done anything that he could do. I mean, there were lots of chances, brother. There were lots of times where it mattered and it could have made a difference. But anyway, that's okay. We don't want to go into that discussion. We can talk about it later. But I had a lot of hopes, and I think you know, we blame someone with whom we have more hopes.
Of course.
You know. So the thing is, maybe I just had very high hopes for him, and he fell short on that. So I'm still hopeful. I mean, but, you know, another 17 years, is that what is being proposed?
No, that's unacceptable. Absolutely not. So my suggestions
17
were...
years is a lot of time. So we have to think of something sooner. I mean, just imagine. I'm sure you also have a sister or a mother or a daughter.
Absolutely.
Just imagine 17 years for what?
Dr. Fozia,
anybody out there,
read what I said at the end. I'm willing to tomorrow, whether it's Imran or whoever, start a global day of solidarity with Afia Siddiqui. We need to do that. Tika? I mean, that there's no doubt that the pressure that comes from below, from our civil society and social movements, if we have zero trust in whether it's Imran, I have zero, the rest of the government, I have zero trust, but I do have trust in Imran. We can disagree on that. Or on the military, or on the military, if we don't have to have trust in that, but we can put pressure on them. But we can put pressure on them. Yeah.
You see, my point of view is that it's the job of the government. We elected them. We should not be, I mean, Imran Khan was with me on this, right?
Yes.
I should not have to come to the streets to beg him to do what he is the one who brought me out in the streets in the first place. You know?
Sure.
As far as I was concerned, my sister was dead. But then when he has the power.
Yes, as Dr. Sami was mentioning. Well, I'm not sure if he has the power. I'll be quite frank with you. I'm not sure if he has the power. If he had the power, he would have showed up in the summit in Kuala Lumpur along with Turkey, Qatar, and so on and so forth, rather than MBS calling him for one day and telling him not to go. So he doesn't have as much power as we may think that he does have. So first of all, and that's just externally. Internally, there are all sorts of other matters. Now we're talking about dealing with the United States, and that's not even Trump right now, and it's not even going to be the next president. This is about the national security state and the CIA waging a vicious war of vengeance. And that's what, I'm sorry to say this, but that's what it's about, and that's why it requires an even more potent response from us, from social movements and civil society to put pressure.
There are international treaties that don't need any of this. There are international treaties. Okay. There are lots of things. There are lots of ways that, you know, Afia can be brought back without having to go through all of this. But unfortunately, we always have a defeatist attitude when it comes to Afia, or when it comes to the dignity of any citizen of Pakistan or a Muslim.
Okay, let me interject here now and respectfully have the last word, because this could go on. And I want to apologize to our viewers that wanted to also weigh in. You know, I'm using a device right now that enables me to see just for a couple of seconds, messages that go up just for a couple of seconds and they're gone. But I know that there are a number of people that also wanted to weigh in. Unfortunately, because of time constraints, we've already gone way over what this program normally uses. It's an hour and a half into the into the discussion, and so we're going to have to bring it to a close. Let me say this. In conclusion, pressure needs to be brought to bear on both governments. There's no question about it. There's no doubt about it. On the Pakistani government and on the United States government, pressure needs to be brought to bear. And in the US, the brothers and sisters from Afia's tribe should be in the forefront of doing what they can to bring pressure to bear on the US government and also on the Pakistani government, because and when I say the Pakistani government, I'm talking about that whole governmental apparatus. I'm talking about the military. I'm talking about the civilian government. I'm talking about the ISI. I know all of them from what I've read and from what I've heard. All of them have their place in the decision-making process, which makes things very complex and when it comes to issues like this, very, very cumbersome. But pressure needs to be brought to bear. I want to conclude by reminding our brothers and sisters on this note of the responsibility we have to bring the pressure. Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam said, "You must surely command the good and forbid the evil. Otherwise, it is expected that Allah will send against you a punishment, and you will supplicate him, but your supplications will not be answered." This is from Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. It's very clear, it's very direct. It applies to individuals and it applies to nations. Pakistan calls itself the Islamic Republic of Pakistan, Islamic Republic. Shaykh Ibn Taymiyyah, rahimahullah, he said, civilization is based on justice, and the consequences of oppression are devastating. Therefore, it is said, Allah aids the just state, even if it is non-Muslim, and withholds his help from the oppressive state, even if it is Muslim. America is going through a lot of changes right now, a lot of turmoil right now. America is being punished. Pakistan is being punished. There are many other countries around the world that are being punished because of their violations of this universal law of justice. And that punishment is going to continue. As long as we continue to, ignore the responsibility that we have as citizens, those of us who are in government, the responsibility that we have as parts of government, responsible for, administering the affairs of state in the ways, in the manners that we should, we're paying a price, and we're going to continue to pay a price. Our sister Afia is a litmus test. She is a thermometer of what ails us as individuals, as a collective, and as nations. So we had better begin the process of stop making excuses and addressing ourselves to these major issues of our time, especially as it pertains to issues like this, and bring about a resolution before it's too late. SubhanAllah, I can only, I wonder sometimes, and it causes me sometimes to, sleeplessness. I wonder, if someone like Afia Siddiqui ends up dying where she is, what will the implications of that failed test be for us? So on that note, I know it's late in Pakistan, and my sister, my dear sister, and all of the others in that neck of the global woods, I thank you for staying up with us so late. I apologize to the my brothers and sisters of CCF who are responsible for this program, for going so far over time, but I think it was time well spent. A lot of information came out. I hope it gives us a sense of renewed vigor for the struggle ahead, and we pray to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that the time comes soon when our sister is back where she belongs, back where she never should have been taken from, her home. Subhanaka Allahumma wa bihamdika, la ilaha illa anta, astaghfiruka wa atubu ilayk. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuhu. Please give us hugs and kisses to everybody on that side. Sister Fawzia, starting with your mother, our mother. Yes, indeed.
My mother always mentions you and prays for you. You're always every day, not a moment that we talk of Afia, we talk of you, Brother Maury.
Alhamdulillah.
May Allah bless you all. And everybody who attended, I know it's late in Pakistan and you're still up, all of you, and Brother Sami. I'm always forever grateful to everything that you do, and your advice, your patience is a big lesson for me. I always pray that Allah give me patience as well. And just may Allah make it easy for all of us. Ameen.
Ameen. Dr. Sami, may Allah bless you, brother, for remaining that strong voice now on the other side of the world. Maybe I'm hoping, I've been hoping before you go, I'm just going to throw this in there. I've been hoping that maybe through you or our dear brother Cyrus, or someone else over there who has been feeling for Afia, that maybe a plug can be made to that leader over there in Turkey to maybe exert some muscle, from where he stands. This is our sister, and this is an issue that is transnational in consequence and implication. But may Allah bless you, brother, for maintaining that torch of struggle on our sister's behalf and for others.